So AI is reshaping work, but are we ready to change our minds about it? We've all seen the headlines. ANZ cuts 1,000 roles. AI will handle all the work. Microsoft replaces product teams with GPT-powered tools. AI-led job cuts sweep through banking, tech and admin. It's not the future, it's right now. But really the question for business owners, leaders and teams is it's not just can we adopt AI, I think that's pretty clear, but it's can we adapt how we think about it. Now, today I'm pretty excited because I get to share this podcast with a very good friend of mine and also a brilliant human, Michael McQueen. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Good to spend some time chatting.
Yes, it's very fun in this very formal environment. This is what everyone introduces you on a stage says, so it's very formal. Michael McQueen understands what it takes to thrive in a rapidly evolving world. Widely recognised for having his finger on the pulse of business and culture, he has helped some of the world's best-known brands navigate change and stay ahead of the curve. Michael is a best-selling author of 10 books and features regularly as a commentator on TV and radio. His work has featured in publications ranging from The Guardian to Forbes and CNN. Having presented to over 500,000 people across 5 continents since 2004, Michael is a familiar face on the international conference circuit, having shared the stage with the likes of Bill Gates, Mel Robbins, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and locally on our TV too, I must say on the Today Show often. Cool, let's crack in. I've got a little question for you in one moment. Got a little break and then we'll dive right in. Cool. Michael, now, Mindstuck is your most recent book. Can you just give us what is the highlight of that? What made you write that? And what is if there was one big takeaway from it, what would it be?
Yeah, so the basic premise or the focus of the book is around the psychology of stubbornness. Essentially looking at why do people, even really intelligent, educated, experienced people who should know better, why do we so often see them and us as well dig our heels in, even when we know we should change and be more open to change? And so that's the premise. The backstory was a conversation I had at a conference. I was doing a book signing at an event in Sydney. A woman came up to me and introduced herself, and she's, I talked about disruption and change at the conference, all the stuff that was coming for their particular industry. This is probably 9 years ago.
Wow.
And I was talking a lot about AI because AI is not new. We're all talking about it like it's this new thing. So 72 years old this year as a term, not new. So I've been working in that space for well over a decade. So I was talking about that at this conference, and this woman came up during the book signing. And she had this sort of intense sort of energy about her. I'm like, it could go either way. This could be someone who's going to really challenge me, disagree with me, whatever, or something else. I wasn't sure. It was the something else. She actually came up and said, I couldn't agree more. I'm so with you. She said, in my business, she said, if we don't change, she put it at 5 or 6 years until they're out, until this Kodak moment for them. She said, we're so dated. And she said, my biggest challenge is I cannot get my leadership team or even my own team to wake up. I can see what we need to do and I can see the writings on the wall, but they're just so oblivious and so stubborn in their view about how the business should run and the way we should do things because that's how we've always done it. Yeah. Her question was, how do I change their minds? And so I said, well, what have you tried? And all the things she said were the things we've been told to do for decades. She'd made the case, she'd given the numbers, she'd done the burning platform thing, hadn't worked. And so that was sort of triggered me looking at this question of, well, what actually does work? If you want to get through to people who are very rigid or mind stuck, how do you do that well? That was 9 years of a process of, essentially interviewing and researching work from some of the latest neuroscience stuff around this space and then writing the book based on it. So it's been a fascinating journey.
That's me. And I mean, I did get to see some of the behind the scenes. And so it was amazing to watch that journey as you did. You kind of wrestle with this because you're on stages with really large companies, and that is the big wrestle that they have. And so at the top in the intro, it's ANZ cuts jobs, Microsoft replaces teams, AI-led job cuts sweep through. We've just had CommBank that made these massive announcements about this big AI project, and then they've rolled it back. They made a bad move. And so in your book, there's why logic doesn't shift belief was interesting for me. How resistance to change isn't about data, it's about identity and what it takes to persuade people and yourself to move. Yeah. So I want to dive into that in a second, but also then you've written another book, The Case for Character. And I think these two actually go hand in hand in this moment because when I talk to business owners, as we start to introduce AI into their business, they're faced with these, and I was chatting to the CEO of Compassion only last week, and she said, I know about the technology, I know what we need to do, and I can see it, but it's just not the character of our organization to adapt and adopt something like this.
Yeah.
And it's really true. And so in that, it's AI is changing what we do, character shapes how we do it, and mindset determines whether we'll change at all. So there's three big topics. Organizations are facing a triple threat: speed of change, the collapse of trust, and mindset paralysis. So let's unpack a few of these things.
Yeah.
Speed of change. As you kind of go from stage to stage and organization to organization, what is the most unsettling thing that you're seeing about this within organizations, whether good or bad, or whether they're adopting or they're not, but just the sheer speed of this? What's your observations at the moment?
So if you look at AI specifically, I mean, there's lots of changes that are affecting businesses that I'm working with. But the big one is AI, and it's the one that they're all talking about, that it's in the news headlines every day. I mean, we read a few headlines at the top of the interview, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there was an article in The Guardian yesterday about one of the employees from one of those banks who the article was, she's basically spent the last 2 years training the bot that's now replaced her. She's lost her job.
Yeah.
And so just that intensely personal thing, it's like it's important we don't gloss over that when we think about productivity gains and how clever the technology is and the rate of change and all the sort of bright, shiny things. The reality is this is people's life.
Yeah.
This is their livelihoods. And so we'll come to that theme shortly. The theme of loss is really important to keep front of mind because it is one of the most important planks we've got to understand or address. If we look at why people resist change, it's not about change, it's about loss. So we'll come back to that. But if we look at AI specifically, the biggest risk I'm seeing for companies right now is there's firstly a lot of frenetic pace implementation, not done very well in many instances. There's also a lot of hype, a lot of people using lots of words that sound very impressive.
Yep.
Like agentic AI, for instance. The reality is very, very few companies are actually doing properly agentic AI. They all talk about it. In fact, I was at this event recently, and one of the speakers there was a professor from Sydney Uni, and she's in the computer science section. That's her area. She's very, very good with the tech side, has spent decades in that space, real expert, and from a technical standpoint. She was so funny. She said her read on this is that right now, AI is a bit like teenage sex. She said everyone's talking about it. Very few are actually doing it. No one's doing it well. And there's a whole bunch of safety issues involved. And I was like, that is the best way to describe this. And so that's what I'm seeing with clients right now. I mean, I was working with a business yesterday, and so they're using Copilot internally because they're a Microsoft-based business, so for them, Copilot makes sense. I mean, if you're a Google business, then Gemini makes sense. But typically, it's for a lot of my big corporate clients, it is using Copilot because it's secure and safe.
Yeah.
The truth is, it's still not great. It doesn't work anywhere near as well as the other platforms. Not as intuitive. So everyone in the room, I mean, I didn't do a show of hands because it's too awkward. But this is the leadership team, 180 leaders, and I said, how many? I didn't want to ask with a show of hands, but I said, I wonder how many of you. You'll use Copilot, but you'll get to a point where it just doesn't do the thing you need to do. So you go over and open up ChatGPT or Gemini, and you're using multiple AI tools. But I said, it's not just you as the leaders, your teams are doing this.
Oh, yeah.
The stats around how many people within organizations, and like a group I was working with on Monday was a whole bunch of financial advisors. And the reality is they've got staff who are using these tools and they're putting information into it. Sensitive information, like not just client names, but client addresses, bank accounts, dates of birth, superannuation policy numbers, like stuff that is really private. And the staff aren't aware, and many of the businesses aren't aware, just some of the risks. So I think those are the things I'm seeing, a lot of jumping after the latest bright, flashy thing, not necessarily implementing it sensibly, and then unaware of some of the security risks.
And that's massive because, I mean, I see that a lot too in my own organization as we start to implement and as we go through like getting additional certifications in whatever security we need to get to work with whatever organization. The questions aren't even up to date. Like to even get certified, they're not asking up-to-date questions about AI and implementation and, privacy and what systems you're using. So it's really interesting to see from an organizational level. Innovation is far outpacing anything else at the moment. And so everyone is, as you said, frantically just trying to say, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like teenage sex. That's so good. But there is so much that could go wrong with it, and that is going wrong in organizations. Let's come back to that loss thing in a second, because that kind of goes into this, which is second point is the collapse of trust, customers, staff, public. The AI index report came out. It was the 2024 AI index report. Stanford University put it out every year, and it's brilliant. It talks about every industry, who's adopting, who's leading geographically, what countries are doing it, blah, blah, blah. But the stats were huge in terms of back then. So this was the 2023 year released in 24, and obviously a lot has happened since then. But organizations that said we are implementing AI, trust within the organization skyrocketed because of the transparency of it, I think. But also, and I think this has changed, and I'm interested to see what 2025 says, but also retention of staff increased. All of these things because they were using AI. But that was a support system. Back then it was AI was there to support and help us in our role. Move on a year even, and now it is the replacement. And we talked about that that lady that trained her replacement in AI.
Yeah.
And so what are you seeing now if the kind of subheading is the collapse of trust within organizations? Is that what you're seeing? What are you seeing as you read the headlines and what's happening in this space?
So it depends on the role function and the industry. So some industries, it's, for employees, they've spent so much time. I mean, the productivity summit, 3 weeks ago, the headline stat there was that we're wasting 11 hours a week. Wow. Looking for documents, paperwork, faffing about, wasting energy, essentially. And so for a lot of people who are in paper-based jobs, they realize the benefits of this in saving energy and time. There is that line, though, where it crosses where suddenly we're not about achieving additional productivity. We're now looking to essentially replace the human element in the equation. And I am seeing some signs of that already. But I think that's when trust starts to get, whether it's trust or just a sense of wariness, like, okay, this is all moving fast. Do I have a place here in 5 years' time? And so I think that's certainly a feature. It's interesting that they would measure a metric like retainment in a business. Because one of the terms for this year, which has been interesting, every year we've got these like HR love their terms, don't they? They love their like whatever the buzz topic is. We had like quiet quitting, people who are just like disengaging quietly and drifting away, particularly with remote work. And now the term is job hugging. People who are staying in jobs they hate, they're not engaged, they're not loving it, but they're terrified of leaving because what's happened, certainly we're seeing this in the US right now, is that the merry-go-round stops spinning. So if you've got a job, you're doing okay. But if you're out of work trying to get a job, it is harder right now. In fact, the youth unemployment rate yesterday in the US just passed 10.5%. For young people, this is huge. And so you can understand why someone who goes, all right, I don't really know about this whole AI thing. I don't even know if I'm on board with it. But hey, if I've got a job, I'm going to stay as long as I can. I'm going to cling to this thing.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that retention would be one of the metrics of whether AI is being seen positively. I think there's a lot of people are like, I'll just hang on and do whatever I can to keep the job, even though there might be a sense that AI could threaten them. So that's probably the darker side of it. I think the reality is for a lot of people, they just realize they can be much more productive. And I'm seeing organizations who aren't necessarily culling staff, but they are changing what their staff are doing. So if you look at an engineering firm like Worrells, for instance. So Worrells have actually, their announcement is they want to essentially double the effective headcount of the business, not by hiring more people, but by using AI well.
Yeah.
And so this is not about cutting staff. They want to keep the staff they've got. They've trained their staff well. They love their team. They know the value the humans bring in the equation, but they want to arm those humans with AI tools that make them twice as effective as they were.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm certainly seeing is, I think in my own sense, like how much of my time I'm saving any given day using AI to do all the faff. Like there's so much time that I'm saving. Like when I think of now versus 2 years ago, my day-to-day, week-to-week work, It is, I mean, it's not night and day, but it is so much more efficient. And I'm writing a book at the moment. The contrast with this book and the one I'm writing now and the one that came out most recently, in fact, that last one, I submitted the final manuscript 2 weeks before OpenAI launched the first version of ChatGPT. So there was no generative AI involved. It didn't exist in the forms we know it as now. Now, the amount I'm using it to essentially condense large content and ideas and sections of other people's research, so I want to sort of get that down to 6 or 7 paragraphs in my own voice, and then I'll rewrite it myself. That condensing down process, let's say there was a chunk of research from a McKinsey or a Deloitte study that might have been 4 or 5 pages. Now, for me to condense that down for the bit that I needed for a manuscript, in previous pre-AI days may have taken me 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
I'm now doing that in about 12 to 13 minutes.
It's insane.
This is to get to the second draft. I'll have to do a third draft where I go in and I'm not going to use what AI produces as what I submit at the end, but the synthesizing piece, that's just one example. So I think many of us are seeing the benefits of this. So there is that sense of, if you're already skilled, it's a great superpower. You're like, oh my goodness, I could do this now. I can do that plus or that times 5.
Yeah.
The concern I do have for employees, if you're younger in your role, inexperienced, you look at finance, accounting, law, where you do the grunt work that's just not fun for the first few years. Like in law, you do a lot of discovery work in research. You're looking through cases, identifying precedents, scanning rapidly old case documents, see what's relevant, what's not. That's not fun work. No one's ever enjoyed it, but it gets your eye in.
Yeah.
You're developing skills and instinct in doing that process. If you shortcut that, what are we missing? So those are some of the considerations that I'm sort of aware of and watching right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a common connection we have who started a school up in Newcastle, I've been chatting to him about like what are the AI pathways within education now, because kids are using it, and we saw recently usage rates dropped dramatically when kids went on holidays in the States.
I saw that. That was wild, wasn't it? Oh my goodness.
And so kids are using it, and they're using it a lot. What do you think? I mean, these are kind of like crystal ball moments, but as kid, you cut your teeth on going from school to school and chatting to them. If you were to do those rounds now, talking about some of these things, what would be the topics there? What are you most excited about with the teens coming through?
Yeah.
What are you really scared about too?
It's a very, very big question. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but it's a good question. So let's go there for a sec. I think one of the things I'm seeing that's very positive about AI is it can be a really useful research tool. It can also be really good from a soft skills development perspective. In fact, I was sharing with a group earlier this week a prompt that you told me about, I think, or you posted about that one. I don't know where you got it from. Maybe you made it up, this idea of, what are the top 3 blind spots that I've got?
Yeah.
And that is just honestly one of the best prompts to use. And so AI can be a fantastic coaching tool. And so for young people, if you're trying to develop your skills, go for a job interview, if you use the stuff well, it can be brilliant. We are seeing some interesting examples of this from a mental health standpoint. Because, for a lot of young people, if you're like, let's say, go back to age 15. Age 15 is a horrid time, dreadful. Year 8, year 9 from an Aussie perspective, I don't know what that is in New Zealand or other parts of the States, but it is just a really awful time. And often the most difficult thing is you're in this soup of emotion and hormones and, who am I? Where do I fit in? Where am I going? And sometimes actually identifying what you're feeling is half the challenge. And what I am hearing from therapists working with young people is that young people will use AI to sort of describe what's going on. Essentially, AI can go, that's interesting, what it sounds like your feeling is. And the young person's like, yes, that is actually, that's the perfect way to describe it. They're too close to it. They're in the soup of all those emotions and hormones. So there's some great stuff from that perspective. I think some of the risks, a couple of risks in terms of AI. First one would be you rob yourself of the skill of mastery when you outsource the hard stuff.
Yep.
You think back to some of those courses you would have done, and we all did them. I know at uni, for me, it was accounting. I hated accounting, desperately hated it. It was one of those courses where I spent the entire semester working so hard. And it was only about 3 days before the final exam, something clicked. I'm like, now I get it. This double entry counting thing, like, firstly, stupid. Like, honestly, what the hell? But like, I finally get it. And as soon as it clicked, everything like slotted into place. And all that work I'd done throughout the semester, just bashing my head against a brick wall, trying to do whatever they were. There was a certain name for whatever the exercises were. And we'd have these practice sets of companies, fake data, and we have to try and figure all that accounts out. But I remember that moment 4 days out and going, I get it now. All of that clicked into place, and all of that cumulative experience of the grunt work was suddenly worthwhile. And also the feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like that there's something about that. Talk about self-esteem, for instance. And Martin Seligman years ago wrote a fantastic book around this called The Optimistic Child. And it's not a new book, but my goodness, it is super relevant right now. So it's a bit controversial in some ways because he challenges the orthodoxy that things like self-esteem can be given. Can't be, he would say. You can't give another person self-esteem. Self-esteem is an internally generated thing. You can give someone encouragement. You can maybe foster confidence, but genuine self-esteem is a bubbling up thing. It's like, and typically it's a function of mastery. I can do something, therefore I feel powerful. I've got agency and a sense of accomplishment. What AI could well do is rob a whole generation of some of those moments of just having to tough it out, get to the point of prevailing, and then the mastery that comes as a result. And in the short term, it's like a sugar hit. Gee, it feels good because, hey, ChatGPT wrote this really hard essay for me. How good's that? But actually, like the sugar hit, you then over time that loses its potency, doesn't taste as sweet, but also it's not good for you. Like it's a diet that's not going to be healthy for your soul. And I feel like that robbing of mastery is probably the thing that I'm most acutely aware of right now.
It's such an interesting, like even if you project that into adults and think about projects at work, and although we can be more efficient and all of those things, and you talked about it in like entry-level law where you're the grunt work of reading contract and understanding nuance in terms and, the parallels with other cases, and you just miss these moments of, I see the connection here. Yep. And so going back to this principle, the founder of this, they're reverse engineering AI. They understand that AI kids are going to use it to get the answer.
Yep.
Well, use AI and now tell me, how did they come up with that answer? And so they're reversing it to try and get kids to think critically around answering. And so it's an interesting battle because, like, even as you're speaking, I think about our engineers in our organization and what would have been like I slogged over this code for days. Yes, they don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
But also to then troubleshoot it, they didn't see the steps it took to get there, and so they can't see the code that's broken. And okay, you can use AI to find the error code, but just understanding, I came up against that particular issue, and that's where I know there's going to be a kink in code. So it'll be interesting to see this play out. Let's go to the next part, which is mindset paralysis. Now, you mentioned at the top 9 years ago you had someone say, we've got 5 years until there's this Kodak moment.
Yes. Yep.
I chat to business owners, especially in debt collection at the moment. We do voice AI, and so a lot of them are saying like, we just see this space is moving to digital only, and it's not going to be all humans. And so I have this tension every day of a lot of what we do does support and replace some human function. But business owners are either really pushing into this or they're struggling to kind of convince the rest of the workforce that this is where they need to go and they need to start thinking about this. What are you seeing as you travel around from a mindset point of view about AI, whether they're stuck, whether they're moving too quickly and therefore making bad decisions, but also how do you bring your team up to go, this is good, even though I know maybe it's going to replace me? Like, how do you do that?
If you're after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. But if you want guidance tailored to your situation, head to moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help. We'll connect you with one of our trusted professionals, financial advisors and mortgage brokers, who work with people right across Australia. No matter where you are they can help. Now, before we get back to the show, a quick reminder to protect your financial life. That means having income protection sorted. It means having death cover if there's any debt or dependents relying on you. It means getting your personal insurance in order. Most people insure their car, they insure their house, but what about themselves? Sky Wealth, who support this podcast, are specialist financial advisors who can help you get the right cover in place. Their advice is often more comprehensive and better value than going direct through your super. Book a complimentary 15-minute chat at sky.com.au. That's skye.com.au, and they'll point you in the right direction.
It is hard. So if we look at, some good case studies of this and looking at what are the things, the tripwires that cause resistance, that means what could otherwise be a really useful implementation for a business, could give you productivity gains, much more effective at what you're doing, not take out jobs. Let's say if we just take that off the table, let's just say implementing AI tools that are just going to really help the business.
Yeah.
Even like I see the resistance to that stuff, and what fascinates me is like, why is that there? And like a good case in point, so someone I know, a colleague who does high-end AI implementations for a lot of financial services businesses. I said to him, I said, when you're pitching these AI tools to large banks especially, and it's normally the C-suite you're pitching them to, I said, who's most resistant? Because I thought it would be maybe the CEO, like a bit old school perhaps, or maybe the CRO, Chief Risk Officer, who's nervous about security and the rest. That would make sense. He said, actually, no, often they're okay. He said the ones who's most resistant, ironically, CIO, CTO. Like the technology people is like, yeah, they're the most resistant, because the problem is I'll go in and we'll present what we could be doing, like what they could be doing with AI, that the efficiency gains, productivity uplift, all the rest. And he said the first response of the exec team is to look at this and go like wide-eyed excitement, like this is unreal, like what a fantastic tool. We'd be crazy not to use it. And then they look at the second response, so is to look at the CTO and say, how come you didn't tell us about all this? And in that moment, that CTO is embarrassed in front of their peers. This outsider's come in and pitch something that as the person in charge of setting tech strategy for the business, why weren't they guiding or leading that process? So he said in that moment, the problem is if I'm not careful, that CTO, that CIO will white ant everything we present or propose from that point forward because they've been embarrassed.
We've had that happen because the CTO goes, they're embarrassed, and then their next response is, I could do this. And so they overestimate their capability and time and resource to be able to actually achieve what we've done.
So you're finding the same thing. That's interesting. Hey, because like, and what's interesting too, I bet if you actually ask that CTO, if you are able to ask them, deep down they know it's good and that they should do it and it would benefit the business. But it's like if their dignity has been so bruised that they can't admit that with that losing face, then they won't admit it. And that's really at the core of a lot of the key findings, as I know, that 9 years of researching, particularly the neuroscience of what happens in our brains when we get resistant, to look at the part of our brains that where stubbornness lives. It's typically a group of brain regions or functions called the limbic system. So near the top of the brain stem, it's where things like the amygdala resides. It's where we process a lot of emotions. The challenge is our limbic system is hypersensitive to threat. And it's what's kept us alive as a species, because when a threat emerges, it jumps to action. And like we go fight or flight. But we don't do fight or flight when we're exposed to ideas that are threatening. Because our instinctive mind will respond. I call that part of our brain the instinctive mind rather than the inquiry mind, which is the logical frontal lobe bit. But if you look at the instinctive mind, that limbic system, it does respond to psychological threats like ideas, new proposals, new technologies, new data that is confronting, unfamiliar, unsettling, responds in a very similar way to if it was a physical threat like a tiger jumping out from behind a bush. But instead of doing fight or flight, it does things like denial or defensiveness. And this idea of just pushing back because it's too confronting to take on board, and it feels too threatening. So the interesting thing is we're not afraid of change. And that's the thing that stood out to me most when I was writing the book is we just assume as humans, humans are afraid of change. That's just part of the human condition. We say it so often, we assume it's true. If you look at the neuroscience around this, that's not the case. We're not afraid of change. What we are afraid of is loss. And the three losses that cause people to be most resistant to change, whether it's AI or any other change really, the loss of dignity. So once ego gets involved, the loss of power, this idea that I've got power, and if we change, I might lose some of that power. And often power is expressed in the sense of I've got access to information or data that only I have. And if we change, I might lose some of that power.
Yeah.
The third one is the loss of familiarity. This idea of even if the status quo sucks and it's inefficient and I don't like it, I know it. And the reality is, as humans, we'll often opt for unhappiness over unfamiliarity. We'll stick with stuff that sucks, that we don't like, that isn't working for us, but the devil you know is better than the one you don't. And like I saw a great example of this a little while back. So I was chatting with a client. She's the CEO of a retail brand, and they rolled out a brand new back-end system for their sales teams around the country. And like their old system was a mess. Like it was developed like 20 years ago. It was pretty much DOS based. It didn't work on smartphones, didn't interact with social media very well. They couldn't do dynamic pricing and pricing coupons and campaigns. It was very, very limiting. So they'd spent 2 years rebuilding their system with a little bit of AI built into it, but it was all just about supporting their sales teams, worked on smartphones seamlessly, worked with social media. So they were about to launch this new system, and she was quite excited because she showed me the new one. It was really it was a great system. They launched it a few months after they launched it. I checked in with her and said, how's it gone? Fully expecting her to be like, it's been unreal. The business is growing. Can't believe it. Like, why didn't we do this earlier? And that's not what she said at all. Like her whole vibe was almost like crestfallen. Like, it's just so defeated. And she said, the pushback we've had, she said, this has been the hardest thing we've ever rolled out, or that I've ever rolled out in my career. She said, we've had people resign. They've left the company. They hate the new system so much. We've had petitions going around with people signing petitions to go back to the old system they all hated. And she's like, and the phrase was, I underestimated how afraid of change our people are. And, that we often assume that's the case in this instance. And in most instances, that's not it at all. They're not afraid of the change. They're afraid of the loss. And so in that instance, they lost, in most cases, familiarity and also a level of power. They had access to stuff that only they had in their businesses. And now they're going to share it with this system, but also it's a loss of familiarity. This is new and it's different from what we've known. So in that instance, they would have been much far better to bring people on the journey of the change, get a whole bunch of people's input, drip feed it in, give them that sense of training. So it was like, we feel now familiar and confident with the new system, as opposed to just going, new system is so good, you're going to love it, knock yourself out. And then people are like, oh, goodness, I don't know how to do it. And I feel like an idiot. And I don't want to admit I feel like an idiot. So I'll just say I hate the system. So these are all the things I see play out. This is how that psychology of stubbornness can become like, it'll either cause a new change to stick or be massively rejected.
Yeah.
And I often see the rejection one is the response.
It's so interesting. I mean, the people listening to this range in organizational size. So you could have local tradesman that it's just him, all the way up to kind of mid-tier organizations with 10, 50 employees, let's say. There's a term here. What does a character-led, persuasion-smart organization look like in an AI economy? And so if you think about a tradesman who has someone working in handling their calls, and then suddenly, like I know of a great system, Sophie AI for tradespeople, it'll take all your inbound, outbound calling for trades.
Yep.
So someone, whoever it is, now doesn't need to pick up the phone. But it's great for the tradie because he's in a roof installing air conditioners. He doesn't want to pick up the phone. All the way through to you've got people that are working in a larger organization, and the boss goes, cool, I've found all these great systems. It's going to be great for our business. And how do you present this well to people? Because Fiverr sent out, like the CEO of Fiverr sent out this massive email saying we're all doomed. Everyone's job's up for grabs with AI, including mine. And like it was this letter that was super confronting. And then Microsoft sends one saying in the next 3 years we're going to see a reduction of at least 30% in our business. Like there's all these letters coming out. How do you do this well? Whether it's just installing a little system or making massive changes to an organization. How do you approach this well?
I mean, it's tricky to answer because it does depend on a whole bunch of factors. So most of it, if you go back to the theme of trust, I mean, trust is such a big part of this. So sometimes the value of trust, like the best way to win and maintain trust is that sense of honesty, just being clear with your people. But there are times when you need to use discretion as well. Like how much do you share at what time with your people? You can't share everything all the time. So that's where it's tricky, because if you've got a small business of 3 to 5 staff, it is a little bit more like a family. And I hesitate with the word family. I don't love it when I see clients talk about this is like a family. It's not a family. It's a business. There is a different set of power dynamics involved. There are different dependencies. I think when you start bringing language like family, actually stuff gets quite messy. So it's always actually smart to steer clear of that in an employment arrangement. But it can be a little bit more like a family. Like it is just, we're all going to talk about this together, figure out the best plan forward. Because their families and their spouses and partners and their kids. And it's very different when you're setting a strategy for a small business where those relationships are strong and that's what gives the business that sense of being robust. Now, if you look at a large corporate like Microsoft, very different story. Like the CEO of Microsoft can't have as many open and frank conversations about what they're thinking of doing with AI. And so where's that line of discretion versus openness? But I think having a sense of transparency and openness is pretty important right now to building trust, because the problem is, and we've seen cases in the last 2 weeks of employees finding out essentially by mistake they're about to get let go because of technology.
Yeah.
And just what that does
they got redundancy letters before an announcement. It's
so bad. Actually, I think it was even the other way around. There was an announcement before the letters came out. It was just,
that's right.
It's just a mess. And those things are just oversights. That happens because humans are humans and systems are systems. But I think the more you can be open with people and bring them on the journey, the better. Because if you look at character and trust is so much about being transparent and being open, but then there are boundaries where you need to show discretion, and that is often a function of how large the organization is and how much power that person's got. So you might be the CEO, but you're answering to a board, and that board has all sorts of restrictions on what you can and can't say at various points. But I think at the moment there's no simple answer, because I think the jury is still out as to what the human cost for this stuff is going to be.
Yeah,
I see predictions that this is going to have there'll be as many jobs made as there are replaced. I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. I just don't think it's true. I think there'll be jobs created, definitely, but I don't think it's going to be like for like, or not even like for like, one for one. One job lost, one job gained. And also I get nervous when I see these predictions that we'll see upwards of 40, 50, 60% of white collar jobs evaporate in the next 3 years. I just don't think organizations are organized enough to implement the stuff at that sort of scale or pace to make it work. There's also a sense that businesses know that in the short term they might save some money, but it goes back to the Henry Ford principle. He'd rather pay his staff more, and then they all bought cars. This idea of, if you're running a business and you're a business with significant scale, like Microsoft, for instance, you're well aware that you might save a whole bunch of money for a couple of quarters in the short term by firing a whole bunch of staff, but the ripple effect on the economy means in the long term, you're actually going to find a significant drop-off in demand, because enough big companies do that. We're talking recession territory there. So there could be other factors that come into play that mean you've got organizations keeping employees, not necessarily because they absolutely need them, but because of what the other net benefits of that are. I think where we are going to land is the middle ground, which is where companies are using AI not to replace their staff. There'll be some that might go, but they'll keep the staff, but the staff will be required to do really different things. And that's where the whole piece around being open-minded, being willing to change your mind, the rubber hits the road. Because if you've got a staff member who's like, no, I like Excel, and I've got a booklet where I write all the things down, I'm not going to use your fancy tool. In that moment, that person, the narrative will play out for them, and it'll be like, I was victimized and pushed out. No, you are unwilling to change. You are unwilling to use new tools and adapt as times and needs required it. And that's on you, and that's on all of us. And I get it, that the pace of change is very dizzying, it's overwhelming, it's a bit annoying. We're all tired. Everyone's just like, can everyone just calm down for a minute? I cannot keep up. And I can't keep up. And I live and breathe the stuff. I can only imagine for someone who's busy teaching a year 2 class at a primary school, they're flat out tying shoelaces and wiping snotty noses. They haven't got time to be across all this as well. There is a sense of overwhelm that comes with that. So, but at the same time, we need to be willing and humble enough to go, okay, I need to change and grow, because if I don't and I lose my job, that is going to be somewhat on me. Just as we've seen with all sorts of other tools and technologies over the last few centuries. So I think that's the middle ground we're probably likely to land on. That it's on us, all of us, to be willing to embrace and open our minds and embrace new stuff.
It's as we wrap up here, it's a great point, because it's really an invitation, and technology has leveled the playing field in many ways. And so I like to think of it more as an optimist, to go, there is a great opportunity for people to upskill, to find new ways. There'll be new businesses generated. There'll be new tools created. It will emphasize creatives who were photographers and now can have illustration in their photographs, like things that you couldn't do before that you wanted to do that would have cost a lot of money to do. You can now do yourself. And I just love it using it with the kids. They draw a picture. I have this great prompt and it brings it to life. And just seeing their eyes as their scribble, my little daughter, as her little scribble turns into a unicorn.
Yep.
Like it's just, there is a real beauty in it as well if we can see it that way. Like it's not just coming to wipe us all out. There is some really good applications. To finish off, what are the top 2 things that you've seen people using AI for that you just think is brilliant, life-changing, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Probably the first one that comes to mind is working in the medical field with doctors. They're using a couple of tools, one called Heidi, another called Lyrebird. And what these do is they actually listen in during a patient consult. And what that actually will do is that essentially transcribes the consultation. And what that then allows that person to do is for the doctor to give the patient a summary of what they talked about. Because how often do you leave a doctor's appointment and you're like, oh gosh, I take it 3 times a day or 2 times a day or 5 meals or 10 meals or if it's been bad news, like you're overwhelmed. You're trying to like take in what's just been shared with you and everything that comes after that you just forget. Yeah. So from a patient standpoint, it can be really good. But for the doctors, the poor bloody doctors, the GPs are flat out.
Yep.
They're so busy. And so what it means is these AI tools are essentially pre-populating all the patient records. So they don't spend 10, 15 minutes after the consult writing that stuff up. It can draft up the letters to specialists. It saves so much of that time. Yeah. And so I love tools like that because it's a great, simple, practical solution. Privacy is important to keep front of mind with that. We're talking about really important personal medical details. But if privacy is secure as far as I can tell it is with those 2 platforms, brilliant. Another one I was talking about at a conference yesterday is called Tamiki. So Tamiki is actually it's a Maori word, I believe. And so what it is, it's an AI tool that you can use on a smartphone for safety. And so the example I was using yesterday, the company runs a big warehouse, lots of packing facilities, lots of staff. Injuries is the big challenge, and they're wanting to try and up their safety record. They've been pretty good for years, but they've had a couple of dicey years with safety issues. So what Tamiki allows you to do is hold your phone up and video someone while they're doing their job, maybe lifting, moving, stacking, shoving stuff. And it essentially overlays a basic skeletal system and looks at the key points of stress on arms, ligaments. So identifying if that person does keep doing that job in that way, where are they likely to develop an injury down the track? Yeah. And it's so simple, so easy to use, but rather than waiting until someone is sick and then it's the workers' compensation, the rehabilitation and all how do we get in front of it? So little tools like that, I love seeing things like that as well.
That's so good. Well, that kind of wraps up our time. Michael, thanks so much for your insights. And I know you do live and breathe this and you talk a lot. That's your life. But I think for everyone listening, there's some really good takeaways there in terms of as you start to look at AI and it's only just begun, it is moving quickly, but slow is fast in this game, I think, of AI because things can go wrong and all of those things. But for those listening, just take notes. Probably assess how you were feeling as well as you're hearing all of these things because and definitely check out Michael's books, especially Mindstuck. If you start to feel some of these avoidance or denial and all these things that the technology's here and it's going to help and whatever it is, there's probably something to dive in there to go, okay, what is it? Why am I having this reaction to just even hearing about it, even though it's another AI podcast? Here we go. But also there's some really practical steps that you can take as an organization to be transparent and to build trust over time and to not make rash decisions even though innovation is moving quickly. So, Michael, I appreciate your time. You are a legend, my friend. Until next time, we should do it again.
Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Any advice is general financial advice only, which does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Because of that, you should consider if the advice is appropriate to you and your needs before acting on the information. If you do choose to buy a financial product, read the product disclosure statement, PDS, and target market determination, TMD, and obtain appropriate financial advice tailored to your needs. Simo Interactive Pty Ltd, the publisher of this podcast, and Glenn James are authorized representatives of Money Sherpa Pty Ltd, which holds financial services license 451289. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the host or the publisher or their respective license holders.